You can still hear me behind the banner. And banner off. We're officially in the Getting a Killer Bass Sound Masterclass. And now I'm making it sound super official, but we had a nice dress rehearsal backstage where we were just talking and chilling and eating coffee, drinking coffee. So I'll keep that vibe because I don't want to keep things too official. So in this masterclass online, we'll be focusing on getting a killer bass sound, but it's a cheating title. The title is false in a way, and it's meant to be that way because there is no killer bass sound, mainly because more than the other instruments, I think bass really is dependent on the feel that it has in the song. Most times you solo a bass track, if you get the chance to have a mix, and you find out the bass sound is nothing, there's no killer bass sound, there's no single note that just, makes it all amazing, single like frequency or compression or stuff. But there's a killer bass sound in songs that have a killer bass in the context of the mix. That is really, really, really important. You can have really good sounding guitars, still dependent on the mix, really good sounding drums, keyboards, vocals, everything is dependent on the other elements. But on my personal point of view, I think bass is one of the things that really is into the mix between where the drums and the guitars live. So he connects the rhythm with the harmony by providing the fundamental, vibe of the usually the root tone. And so that role, musical role, and the frequency role and dynamics role make it a very dependent instrument. So it was a little bit cheating when I said getting a killer bass sound, because you can get a solo killer bass sound and it will not work in the mix. So what we will do today is I set up a session, excuse me, for a recording session coming up in 2 days for a week. And the band is gonna play my amps, most of them, actually all of them. I think they're not carrying any amps with them. And I've set up my Ampeg B100R amp in the small live room with all of the other cabinets. You see some of the combos, we're not gonna use the Marshall. We are using the Princeton Reverb 2 and the AC30 and a Fender Champ next to it. There's like some others. But I pointed obviously the camera to the Ampeg bass amp. On that camera, in that shot, you see that there are some mics all placed there, and the only one that we will probably use in session will be the Beta 52. I already have a sound in mind that works with the band. I did a little bit of pre-production, so that microphone I will let you hear. We will track it, but I will not move it. Reason being, I don't want to move it. It sounds great where it is. I'm not changing it for this masterclass. I ain't changing it, but I will move the other ones. And we have the chance to test some really, really great mics, most of which are mine. The exception being the N8 by A&A, which the guys at KMR Audio Berlin, thank you very much guys, were so kind to send my way for these recording sessions. So thank you guys. KMR Audio is, a huge store here in Berlin. They have a lot of professional audio equipment, and they came here, they let me try them. I know them because I get a lot of sessions with A&As, so, their ribbon mics really, really nice. Then we'll have an AKG D12, mine, and the Lawton Eden, which is also mine, but I could not get if it wasn't for the nice guys at Lawton. So thank you also very much. And the Beta 52, which is, again, mine. These are all resident mics so far, 90% of them. We're gonna try some configurations of the bass, because the very first step, I think, in this masterclass is how do you start with the foundation of the sound. You know that you can get a bass DI, right? And a bass DI essentially is a very clean, with a lot of low frequencies thing, sound that you capture. And for a lot of years, this is gonna open up a lot of questions and answers for you already. I only used bass DI. I didn't like bass amps that much. And the reason being, they would get out of phase on some notes, be in phase in other notes. I didn't like them much in tracking. Then I started using some, namely like a B12, an Ampeg, you know, the tubes version of what I have here, which is the B100R. It's the solid state version. Same cabinet, different amplifier. And I started really liking bass amps, really liking them. Actually, to the point that sometimes I don't use the eyes anymore, depending on the band. Now, the reason that I moved from one idea to the other, I think was related to the fact that I did not have a very good amp to work with, and I didn't have a very good room to track in, because bass amps, and also guitar amps, but bass amps much more, they are very dependent on the room and the position, depending also on the microphone you're using. I don't like cardio mics for condensers, for example. I prefer figure of eight because I also like the little tail that the room generates when the notes stop. So all of these went into the fact that I really got fond of bass once I had a real nice room to put a real nice amp in and track it with a real nice amp. So in this masterclass, we'll have, as I said, a real-time camera on the Ampeg 100R that I have, and we'll be able to test different mics. The song that I have here is a song I tracked in 2013, I think, and I should have been, yeah, I think 2013. And these guys are, let me make this window a little bit nicer in a way, like this, because it's an HD version of it. And I cut a snippet of these so that we can focus on a little section, and it's going to work anyway. It's a rock band called M.G.R.B, and they're from Florence, Italy. And these guys I've known for a while, and I invited to the studio to test the rooms that I had, you know, just finished in Italy. So this is from the previous studio tracking session. I retook the session and I just quickly put a rough on basses by basses, but I cut a section where we can really hear the bass and how it works. So we don't have a bass player because your nicest killer bass sound starts with the player and the instrument, as usual. Then it goes to the amp and miking, and then it goes to the processing. You know, but if you don't have a good song, if you don't have a good bass player, good bass amp, you know how it works. The chain is really important. But we'll focus on this. We don't have a bass player in today, but we will send the DI through a reamp box into the amp, and we will capture it through the microphones. What we will do is we will capture different microphones in different positions, and we will compare them, and then we will move to some mixing tips in the context of the bass. When you're tracking a song and you don't have a mixing context yet, if you are one of those guys that track really clean and then mix it, which is not my case, you will probably don't have enough context to do that. So if you don't have enough context, it becomes really hard to figure out a sound that works. But I want to let you hear how dynamic tube and ribbon mics sound, and let's talk also about sound positioning. So we will use always the same preamplifier. It's a Neve 1073. All of them are different. It's a Neve, but you have to look at what batch it is. This is my Neve 1073. But we will not change it. We'll use the same one so that the preamp is exactly the same. We're only gonna change microphones and positions. The first mic I want you to hear is what's connected at the moment, which is the ANA M8 Nuvo microphone. It's placed at the center of the speaker cone. I think you can see it, like, you know, if I show you, yes, this, you'll be able to see how the microphone is placed. It's looking, you know, it's tiny, narrow and long, so it blends itself with the stand, but it's right there in the middle between the other two microphones. We are going to listen to how this sounds. I'm gonna just pull this window away because we know it's there. We're gonna take one of these parts. We're gonna listen to how it sounds with the bass in the current state. It only has a C4 plug. This is the DI, and some, well, this is just a tape or whatever, but This is only the C4 that I've placed so that this guy has a little more balanced with the DI. It was a little bit dark to me, so this is the only thing I had done in the initial phase, right? It's nothing that terrible. It just makes sure that the bass has a little bit of high bite, but it will sound like a DI. Let's solo this bass, and I'm gonna let you hear how it sounds by itself. So the speakers went in standby. Just hold on a little second. All right, there you go. All right, so this is the clean DI we captured, and it's, I don't remember what kind of bass it was, maybe a Music Man, I don't remember, and I remember the head that we went through was an Ampeg SVT head, and we captured it. This was all played in real time, guitars, bass, drums, and vocals, which I took away. I want you to focus on the package of all these. Before we go in the context of the song, which I will let you hear later, let's talk about how I routed this stuff. I duplicated this track. So the yellow one is our native DI, which goes straight to the bass bus. The purple one goes instead to A15, the output 15 in this studio that goes to the reamp box. And that reamp box sends it to the Ampeg. The Ampeg is set pretty much flat, little bit less low mids, I don't remember, it's probably 335 if you know that amplifier sort of. And there's again the ANA M8 on right in the middle of the speaker. This purple track you can't hear, but it's only made to feed the amplifier. So let's check if this guy works first. Let's put this bass amp in solo as well, and let's listen to this part and let's hear if we get sound out of that. All right, it works. And it's also amazing that I have open doors and I can see the Ampeg from here, and it's the combination of the two sounds amazing. But unfortunately, we're not gonna get the live sound, we're only gonna get the speaker sound. So I'm then gonna close the doors. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna track this bass. We're only gonna take this part and we're gonna track it. We're gonna send this purple track to the amp plays, the microphone captures it, and then it becomes a track. All right, so let's sort of make something like a segment that is workable like this, so I can do this, and let's print it. Okay, and we tracked it. Let's immediately call these bass M8 center. Reason being, we want to know M8 or N8. I don't remember, so I think it's N8, Nuvo 8, so AA M8. All right, well, I have only that AA, so problem solved. We know it's that. This will remind us what this clip was about. First thing I noticed, and probably you noticed, little bit of compression, not plug-in compression, air amp compression, microphone, amp, interaction, speaker. The low part, the second part that is lower in volume, is a little bit up. And this is gonna help in the mix because, as you can see and hear, there's a lot of dynamic changes between the broken part, the break part, and the sustained part. And this is already helping. But now I'm gonna go move this microphone on the edge of the speaker. So I'm gonna move from the inside, dead center, to totally where the Eden is right now. I'm only gonna move it, so watch me go there. Ciao. All right, so you have no idea how hard it is to maintain balance while standing and doing that, knowing that if I make some mistake, it's gonna be forever live streamed and you can laugh, but it's all good. Side note, you can see there's tape that says don't cross ever, you're gonna die. This is for the band because there's DIs and cables and microphones and amps, and I don't want them to step over anything. That will be their off-limit zone. So now we're gonna do another playlist and we're gonna track the same bass and we're gonna hear the difference between the N8 dead center and the N8 totally at the end of the radius of the cone. Here we go. All right, so this is the second sound. Let's not judge anything. Let's just write bass, A and A, N8, I think it was capital letter, and N8 off axis, or edge. Edge is easier to remember. Now what I'm gonna do is, I'm going to go here to the 1073. I'm gonna power down the 48 when the gain is off, and then I'm gonna unplug that cable in the other room, put it on the Eden, which has its own amplifiers and has been on for a little bit, so it's warm. And we're gonna do the same test, center off axis with the Eden. So, first thing, we go here, we take the phantom power off, and we mute this track so that anything happens, we don't get crackles and stuff. And I'm gonna go and change the amp. I think I can make this a little bit bigger for you. Oh yes, so that you can see how it works. Also, let me save this session because you never know. So I'm gonna change that microphone to the Eden that is on the side. Be right back. Okay, so now we have the Eden in position and off axis. So same thing, only on the edge. I'm only gonna give it gain. I know it doesn't need that much. Let me just test how this works level wise. We're a little bit hot, so I'm gonna leave it there but trim it. Okay, so far so good. We'll gain match later on. So let's record it. Let's record it. Yes. Okay, so these we're gonna call base, Eden, edge. Now, if you know how this microphone works, you may ask yourself, what settings do I have? This guy is now set on forward, no filters at all, and figure of 8. I'm 99.9% sure. I've tried gentle, too dark. I like some of the bite, so forward position has a little bit of high detail. And as I said, I don't like cardio necessarily. I don't like the mic to look only in front of him. I prefer to be back and forth because there's a lot of interaction with the room itself, if it's a good room. But that one is a good room, so there's a little bit of a halo that can translate in here, especially when you start pushing and compressing stuff up. It doesn't show up, but when you compress, it's gonna be there. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna move it on axis. Unfortunately, I can't be at the same exact distance as I am now because there's the other stand. But I said I can't move the Beta 52. Trust me, it's there for a reason. It's a good position. But it really is, it could make a difference. It will make a difference, but it's not that drastic. So let's bring up Apple Cam again. Let's make it a little bit bigger for you so you can see it. And I'll go change the microphone. Okay, so microphone changed. It's on axis, perfectly in the center, and we're gonna record it again. Okay, we're gonna rename this base Eden Center. Okay, next step, Beta 52. So turning off this amp and resetting this guy and going there to change the mic. Here we go. And we're back. So now it's beta 52 time. Let's check the levels. Put these a little bit smaller. And let's check how it sounds with the amp on. Maybe it would be great. Little. So this is a dynamic mic and it needs tons of gain from that guy. But that's good because he can, he has gain. So let's print this. Okay, and let's call these bass beta 52 and its edge. It's really on the edge of the speaker. I like it that way. We are going to do the D12 and then we're done with all the tracking. All right, so again, preamp to 0 and mute the track. And let's go make our final change, but not before I have my camera, so you can see me. Ciao. Okay, here we are. So we track the second one. Again, we check levels. And we're ready to record. Okay, so we are back and we're gonna place these as bass D12 edge. Last one, we go and put it in the center. Then we're done. Okay, I hope he doesn't move. We'll see him if he moves because we have eyes on him. So let's record. Okay, so we have to rename this guy, call him base D12 center. Of course, there's gonna be thousands of millions of other positions that you can try, but these are gonna be our extremes. So we can now compare by shutting down this 2 amp track, which is our purple one, which we're not gonna use anymore. We can now compare the base DI with the base amps that we've created. Now, one of the first things that I want to address is this session already has plugins. So this is what's going to happen if you track reamp something with plugins engaged. Let's hear how the DI is. So you have how you hear. Awesome. Hold on. I want to move this guy over here. Perfect. Now here, what happens when I put the two of them together? One of the random tracks, like these D12. As you can see, the two of them are not in phase. They're not happening at the same time. Why is that? Because it takes time for the electricity and air to go round trip into the converters, and the latency compensation also plays a role because there's plugins there. So when you do this sort of stuff, remember all the time that this is partly why you might not get a great bass sound. There's a little bit of delay, so we have to address that. Now, since we have lots of playlists, we should hope that all of them get cut to a transient here so that I can go down, cut, and take out all of these, right? I'm not the fastest ninja of Pro Tools in the world. Honestly, I don't care. I don't get paid to be the ninja. But if you are faster, trust me, you can use those skills. So now we're gonna nudge everything together on the left, to the left, because we're coming up later than the original track. So let's nudge this guy and let's find a space where it works. Hold on, let's nudge these. Maybe here, do it by hand. It's much more amateur. There you go. So it looks pretty much, there's no way to really know, like when you're crossing zeros. I don't want to make it a science, I don't care. But here's the difference between before and after. Like you heard how things were misplaced. Here now how it works. Have you heard? I've trimmed it and moved it, let you hear it, but then I also like undo, did one couple undos, so I went like from 40 samples to the back to 30, 20, 10. And it does change. It does change a lot. I think this sounds good. Be sure if you move it by one sample, it will change. And this could be the sound, could build up the sound that you want. It could be that this creates the right interaction. So I'm not trying to give you the best sound here. I'm just trying to point out everything that can play a role in your session or in your reamping or in your bass creation. Even if you use virtual instruments, I would double check that things are exactly as you want all the time. And this is a word out to people using virtual instruments. Make sure that things don't change with the load of the CPU that you put. I know in theory you would have perfect latency compensation all the time. I'm telling you, it doesn't always happen. So make a test session, take a Friday afternoon free, like you had nothing else to do, and try out if one or two virtual instruments against your entire setup makes beats or bass or stuff move. Some bugs or features or whatever, they do change a lot. Oh, what did I do? Logo. Yeah, that was cool, but I didn't want the logo. So it really does change a lot. Make sure that these don't change with time. You can't change, like, the more plugs you put and the different, the delay becomes. So I made sure everything was changed. Now let's hear the single notes of this bass through the different ones. We'll start with we're going the order that we recorded them, all right? So you will see me soloing the playlists and you will be able to discern. We'll start from the A, and 8. This is really hard to say. Center, then edge, then Eden edge, center, and the last one being the D12 that we made. And then we'll decide who's better. Let me make a new playlist so everything goes in order down here, okay? So let me open the sound for you. Really awesome. Now, I'm sure, if you're like me, that when we heard the DI, the amp alone, when we were printing, you made up your mind, right? While I was going, you probably said, oh, that's pretty cool. That's gonna be the best. Oh, and then maybe, well, no, the other one's gonna be the best. But I myself know that now that the DI is with the amp, all bets are off. You have to listen to both of them together all the time, because the one microphones that I thought were maybe not the best, they actually are. So the least favorites of the solo sounds for me would be the Beta 52 and the D12. Between center and edge, I like edge. I told you about, and I'm gonna tell you why. If you use the center, I hope you can hear there are resonances that need to be addressed. Let me take just the AEA-N8. This is really hard to pronounce. The AEA-N8 in the center position. Beautiful sound by itself, but not too. Let me open the. It's nice, it's fast as hell, it just gets to you, that's awesome, but there's a little bit of comb filtering happening. Maybe the position wasn't perfect, maybe by moving it on 1 inch, but I hear stuff in the low mids that I would address to make it sound a little more beefier. But if I go to the Beta 52 Edge and we listen to it by itself and then with the DI, you'll hear what I meant with the positions of the interaction between the two. So beta 52 and D12, not a lot of difference, but maybe between the two, I say the D12 is like has that, I don't know, it sounds like something I've heard in a lot of records and really like from the indie rock scene, country rock, Nashville kind of stuff. I like it, but the Beta 52 is a little more modern, maybe, but amazing. Now let's focus on the Eden, which is the only tube that we tried so far, and let's hear it by itself again with the DI, and then we'll make up our mind. So the Eden is what I would use if I had to use only the amp in a song that probably wasn't pushing that much rock. If I wanted a more, I would say, cohesive or like silky sound of the bass, it doesn't have, you hear, it doesn't have much detail, but it doesn't have spikes anywhere. It doesn't, it's a cool sound, I like it, but not for this tune. And the N8 is sort of on the other side. It's like really sharp and fast. So the best complementary sound, I would say, is either the Beta 52 or the D12. The ones that by themselves are the sharpest, maybe, but they sound just great with the DI. So let's keep the D12, I say. So let's promote this guy. And one thing you could do, maybe before we proceed, is that the fingered part, we won't go in detail there, but the fingered part might sound completely different. So who knows, if you want to go overkill, you could do two different mics for two amps for two sections, chorus and, you know, staccato part. But let's say the bass D12 as I would do it in tracking. Do not overthink it. It sounds great, that's it. Remove the playlists. We promoted the D12 to this and we're now good. So we can make it look cool, like to go a little bit back so we don't have clicks. And let's fine tune now what is going on with this bass bus and amp. So we are past tracking, right? Let me go here so you can see me. So we are past tracking. We have done the bass amp against the DI and we used the amp. So now what I would like to show you is how to deal with the phase in real time once you have the tracks. I'll use one plug, but that will give you an idea of what I mean by that. Also, I want to show you how the two things together can be carved in a way. And the third thing is maybe how parallel processing or how the bass can sustain the context of the mix. So the last one will be about context. And let's keep focusing a little bit of this on this. So you might say, what happens if your bass is not, how do you know it's completely in phase, right? How do we achieve that? Well, we nudged the waveform in a way that it looked sort of in there, and it does. Even the D12 is like pretty sort of spot on. We could still move it, we could make decisions on that, we covered that. But now we want to talk about how to really fine-tune the phase. Well, there is one plug called Little Labs IBP, which is like the phase alignment tool, which can help you fine-tune the phase. How does this work? You can delay the track. You can only delay the track. You can anticipate the track, but you can delay, so to the right of your session, and you can phase adjust. You don't only flip the phase, you go 0 to 180, passing by 90 degrees, so you can reshift how things work. And because of latency compensation, this will be addressed and you only have the phase change. You can also bypass just one of the two interactions. You can bypass the entire plug. This is a really cool thing to have. Waves makes in phase, which is a sort of profiling and then automated thing. There's also other plugs that do it. I like to do it by hand. So if you put these earlier, the amp track earlier than the DI, you can put 0 to 4 milliseconds of delay to your bass amp, thus finally finding the conjunction of where the phase is that you like. Now let's try and move it, but I won't push the track, I won't nudge the track left. I will not do it because I like where it is. But I'll show you what it does when you move the track. We've heard these a lot. Let's hear the legato part, for example. And I'll show you while moving the delay adjust, and I'll show you while moving the phase adjust how things interact together. So okay, so you heard how much it can change. You can play with both things and fix the phase. I can also say I didn't find a setting per se that would make the bass inherently like, oh, this is better. I hear some settings that cancel the mids, and that might be a sound you want, but I really like the 300 area where you can hear the fingers of the bass. So I don't want that area to cancel that much. I don't know you. But it could work. It could make space for, I don't know, any instrument probably, because around 300 Hz you have a lot of stuff. So this is a useful tool to have whenever you have low frequency or mid frequency or high phase relationship, just to check if things are in order. So these I would use definitely just to test and make sure, like in this case, I don't feel there's the need to do that stuff. But it's a very cool trick to know. Now, what usually happens is I EQ the amp in a way that it's complementary to the DI. I don't EQ both of them together. I do it maybe at a later stage, but between them, I'll just show you how emphasizing specific frequencies of the bass amp will cancel or just make different frequencies in the DI react. That's also an important thing to note. The other thing is that since these dynamic mics have bass frequencies but not like thick boomy subs, you notice that the DI never dies in terms of subwoofer bass. If you have microphones that are really detailed, or you mic your amp really far, you could have phase cancellation, at which you have to decide what kind of bass roll-off you want on the amp section. Also, if you use plugins, amp simulators, which I used a lot when I wanted to do DI only bass, you find yourself tweaking a lot of stuff, and with the right amp in the right room and the right mic, there's no need to do all the tweaking. This is really something that I was like, oh, is really this easy? Of course it's not super easy, but the time I would spend on a bass simulation plugin, no matter how good it was really long, comparing. I would say, okay, yeah, I have to carve some of the bass from the amp because I don't want it, I want it in the DI. This stuff really just seems to mesh very well, especially with the Beta 52 and the dynamics or these D12 that we chose. But let's try and see areas of the bass amp that we like to emphasize or cut depending on the interaction with the DI. All right. This time it really worked to do what? I carved away around 224 and 1 kilohertz 90, so 2 kilohertz and 250 or 220. Why do I do that? Those are areas where the DI is really nice. The brown area is where the fingers of the bass players are, clearly easier to hear in the DI, and the green area is the detail of the slack of the string. So by carving and dipping a little bit of those two areas, we make sure that the bass amp does not fight against those areas. So then what did I do? I pushed 1.9 dB output more. So the bass amp is now 2 dBs higher, but it lost two very important areas where a lot of energy was. So it sounds pretty much the same vibe, but with a more balanced tone and less comb filtering as well. So these I really like. I would not touch the bass frequencies, like the extreme subs, because if I do that and I am not in linear phase, my bass can completely go to, you know where. So what I might do is on the bass bus, all right? So these two things work. What I would now do is I would go to the context. And this is our last part of the masterclass. We're gonna go to the context of the song. We're gonna keep this as is. We're gonna listen to it, and we're gonna make decisions in the mix, all right? So it's finally time to hear what this bass sounds like in context. So this is the part I've picked. Hope everything works and stuff. So there we go. So again, kudos to the M.G.R.B guys. This is Fabrizio on the vocals, which you can't hear, but he was there. Simone on drums, great drummers. Samuele on the bass, and great players, great people. We had a lot of fun recording, and Davide on guitars. Go look them out. They have a Bandcamp, mgrb.bandcamp.com. This was, it's an Italian title. It's called La Canzone del Maggio. It's based on student revolts and stuff. Really, really cool. And we needed to really track a lot of power. This is not the original mix I've done. This is an in-the-box quick mix that I've done. And I don't know, there's reverb on the snare. The reason for that is that when you put the vocals in, you will not be able to focus on a lot of the reverb on the snare. So now it sounds out of context, and I tamed it just a little bit. But Nimbus and my M3000 are the only reverbs I'm using here, and Nimbus is really working great to give that chamber sound. We're gonna use this a little bit on the bass just to show you how you can blend some of the things, because the bass might sound cooler. So we like this. It's already sort of there. What would you do to make it better? I would say that you could compress it, right? So you put a compressor on and it stays on. Let's try and see if we put the compressor for bass sometimes, like something like an Opto stuff. This would not be the choice that I would go for first, but who knows, maybe it will sound great. So let's tweak the CLA2A by Waves. You all know this plug. I already know, so it will be familiar. It starts off with a little bit too much gain, I think, so let's tweak that a little bit. And from now on, context only. There's not gonna be any more solo bass listening. Nobody will ever hear the bass solo. They will only go like, man, this band rocks, and the bass is so grungy, and it goes with the drums. And they don't care about the solo sound. They care about how it feels in the mix. Let's go. Alright? Could be problem fixed. Could be that the artist like this. It generates a little more thickness that I'm not super fan of, so I would probably EQ it slightly afterwards. But it's really there now. I bypassed it quickly at the very end just to let you hear how even just the overtones of this thing would make the bass be there. It feels there. There's a little bit of 600 hertz, I would say, 500 to 600 that I would carve, so it would look like something like this guy, something like this, probably. Let me hear it like in the finger part. Let me put your out. Perfect example. I said 600, too much 600. It was actually the opposite. What I was hearing was the 300 fingering that was still a little bit prominent in the sound. So maybe it's the DI. Let's hear the DI by itself. Could be that. Could be that. So you could address it by, handling this multiband, this band of the multiband compressor, but careful, this would force you to just listen back to all the balance. So it's there. I don't really think this is necessary, but although you can make it maybe just a little bit like something like this. It's -1 and +1, but it creates an offset where you can really listen to the bass. Again, I'm listening on the 306s by the Focal because I forgot to turn on the Pro X. I am this lazy. But remember to test your bass on smaller speakers. A lot of mixes I get, and I'm gonna go full screen for this because it's such an important community message. A lot of the bass I get is great in the subs, or close to that, like 60 to 90, 100. But from 110 to 180, or even 300, it disappears. And when you go, even if it's an EDM song, to smaller speakers, the bass disappears. There's not enough finger, there's not enough, mass, balls, girth. But it sounds great on subs. So careful with heavy bass speakers or stuff that is full range. Not everybody has full range stuff, especially the laptops. And why do great mixes sound with bass on laptops? Because the guys who made it were good. And it's not just about mastering, because I'm telling you, it will be hard in mastering to pull out that bass fingers if it's not there. 300 hertz, there's everybody in there. So it's more of a stem mastering or a mixing thing, much more important. But if you start early with tracking, it's gonna be better. So let's go back to the Pro Tools sort of window. And let's get rid of these two guys, and let's a little bit do it more how I would do it. I would try and do it. I don't mean that it's perfect, but I'm gonna duplicate this bus with not the inserts, but the level, yes, and the same bus. So now we have a bass comp that is next to the bass. I'm gonna change these to a darker color. Same exact bass bus. We now have a clean one, and we're now gonna use these to compress it. And I really like to start with, that's what I do when tracking, with an 1176. But because we don't want to offend anyone, we're gonna turn not the CLA. Thank you, CLA, was great having your plugins. We're gonna try and use the UA76, and I'm gonna pick the AE version. I'm gonna play it cool, like, I have these and blah blah blah, but usually, not many people have these. It just has a different tone and sound, and also has a 2-to-1 compression. Maybe we don't use that, but if you compare, if you can demo both, you'll hear it's different from the Rev D. And in softer form, I find this to be a little bit, not better, but like not broken, I don't know, I like it better. So now what are we gonna do? We have an exact perfect copy of the bass, and we're gonna create a parallel, which is the parallel, like a bass comp. We're gonna compress it a lot, and we are going to start with 4:1, and here the final parts of the staccato part going into the fingered part. The objective is to keep the dynamics but increase the density of the mix. And this is in hardware form what I do when I track. I blend the two together, or I have separate tracks, but I usually put an 1176. A lot of people like opto stuff, or like a retro STA level, or a LA2A. I like sort of harder fat stuff on bass, but you know, your mileage may vary. So let's try this guy. Okay, I think this could help, but I can't make the decision just by itself. I need the context, right? So let's go to the context and let's hear both parts here. Right, with your okay, this for me would be a sound I am familiar with and that I like. It's a 4:1 compression. Pay extreme attention to attack and release. Don't just go, whatever. Don't do it. The attack and release are gonna be super important. The release is to set the cushion, I don't know, the pillow that the bass will rest on. So if the compressor discharges too fast, you're gonna get a soundstage change of the bass, and not often this is what I want, you know, rarely it is. I have to have it in a specific place, but I don't want it to fall eaten by the sound, but I don't want it to be super forward either, and that's where the attack comes from. If you make it very slow, which is still very fast in an 1176, you will notice that the fingers, the slap, gets sound because the compressor does not compress as fast. So a little bit of the slap comes out natural and it blends in with the uncompressed bass. This is again DI and amp going clean and then being parallel compressed. So depending on how you move the attack, you will hear just a little finger slap that you might need to bring the bass forward. And that is paramount because it will set, again with the release, the soundstage position of your bass. Personally, from my point of view, where this is, I like this bass. I hear that in the very end of the phrase, the bass player just kept lowering its energy. This I would do with automation. It has nothing to do with the magic plug, with the magic hardware, analog warmth, tape, no. Take a fader and follow this guide. Ride the bass. It's the best thing you can do. We're gonna do it for the very final part, so you know what I'm talking about. You can ride both of these tracks at the same time. You can ride just the amp, just the compressor. Do it whatever you want, but make sure that now we group it. We'll make bass auto. I don't want globals, and I want to just link the automation mode. I think this is fine, so we go to Latch, and we're gonna take a fader. These two things should move together. Oh, they don't. Why they don't? Oh, because I didn't link. Haha, I know that. I didn't link the volume for these two guys. So let's go back to the groups. Right? Told you not the best ninja in the world. Let's link the volume. So now when I move one volume, both will change. And the level of both will be maintained. Right? Let's check it. Yeah. So I undo. So I get back to like what was minus 1.9. And I'm going to write the automation for this guy. Here we go. Before we do it, there was already automation here, so I think I'm gonna just save it so that these two guys in this part are around 0. Hold on, because we are having like this guy here. Let's go to around, I think it was minus 1.9. Nobody will remember, so this was at 0 though. So you see, now every change I make is linked. Thank you, Pro Tools, but we don't need that. We actually need this guy to be at 0. So we'll make something like this. I mean, it's all protectors, we don't need that, but okay. So now I'm writing both at the same time. Oh, it works. Sorry for that little Pro Tools stuff. Okay, that is just an example. The automation moved because the track in the mix was pre-mixed. So the automation that I had told him to ignore actually moved in. But you got the sense of what I was telling. I had to rerun it a couple of times. You can clearly follow the bass and make sure that the settings you found do work. That's because there's no perfect setting that will make this compressor magically work everywhere. I wish there was. There's no setting that can help you. You need to ride the bass. So that's part of why you would get a killer bass sound. Now, another trick that you could add, suppose we don't ride these and suppose we remove the automation read, we go to off and we put both to 0, so the automation doesn't play a role anymore. A lot of people I know use tape as, again, parallel. So last trick in the bunch, we can duplicate this guy. So we have bass tape, and we can put any tape plug that you might like. So let me think, who makes a tape plug that I'm gonna find in here. Studer. Actually, not the Studer. There's a plugin I don't like as tape for finalizing that everybody loves, which is the Ampex ATR 102. I like the real thing, that yeah, if it is well maintained, if the guy knows how to use it, but I don't like it that much on mixes. I never use it, but in parallel, this guy is great. Let's try and see if we can get a better bass sound of these two sections here with these big, it has a big interface. So again, parallel, I don't care about solo bass, I want to hear context. We're gonna try and crush the bass. I know starting point because the few times I've used tape was 250 half inch or 1 inch. I don't remember. I think 1 inch. It was a 24 track, so it has to be 1 inch. A bad tape boy, Alberto. Let's try and see how this guy sounds when we push the level. We don't need a clear sound here, a clean one or anything like that. We're doing parallel with the clean bass and 1176. So now we have a second parallel bass. Let's hear how it works. And let's put it. All right, great tone in the mids. It never goes down. It never falls. It stays there. The only minor issue which you can fix with the, as you can see with the opening of that, is there's a little bit of out of control bass subs. Welcome to tape land. This happens in real life, and that's why tape isn't that magical thing that you might think it always is. It really makes low frequencies shift a little bit. Can be best, can be better, can be not what you want. You have to keep it in mind. Maybe if we filter these a little bit, which I wouldn't do, I would try and find a setting into the plug, the machine and the plug, that makes less bass come out. And probably by calibrating the thing, you'll see you can't get it to have not that much sub. I'm cranking the record, so I'm going hard into the machine, and then I'm just adding a little bit of volume on the reproduce, and we have this little level that floats on top. As you also notice, I keep these volumes, and you notice I only use one window. So I know if you're not comfortable with that, you see me popping up these little volumes all the time. I'm not comfortable with the mix window in Pro Tools. I don't use it anymore. I don't know why. It's my anti-desk mode. I don't know. It's in the genes. And so you notice my volume levels are all at 0. Why do I do that? I want to use these as a very last resort. I don't want these to be minus 5.6 plus 3.2. This is my 0. This tells me that 0 is balanced. This 0 is how I like the sound to be balanced. This is very important because when you automate up or down from this mindset 0. This is why they called it 0. They didn't call it a number in watts or volts or stuff. It's 0, so it means no variation on the volume out. So I'm much more comfortable to automate stuff around that 0. So I see +1 and I'm thinking, okay, I am +1 over that imaginary 0 level that I really liked. If I find things on like minus 11.2, and I have to remember that minus 11.2 was my favorite, it's really hard. And you see, sometimes I have to write it in the note what the original level was and stuff, because we do some like fader right or slippery fader out they're called and stuff, and 2 plus 5, 2.5 plus, it's where probably we let it sit for the final mix. I don't remember. It's in the comments, so it's a mysterious note, might say anything. This is pretty much it. I think this covers everything that comes to mind in terms of this topic of getting a killer bass sound. It's not meant to let you get the perfect, tone because you did use what I just told you. My intention is not that. My intention is to spend an hour and a half together, have fun, and let you realize that the real approach to this mixing topic, like with any mixing topic, is context. Context and starting from a great source. This DI I really like. It's not a clean DI. It's an Ampeg SVT that was recorded. That was one of the things. It's played in tempo with the other guys because they're all playing together. So sometimes I hear that, it doesn't necessarily go to the click. I don't care. The band had the right energy when they were all together, and that thing just doesn't, it flows. So it's okay. I won't fix it unless it disturbs me. And that's the second thing. The third thing was, now we have great amps. The room sounds amazing. That small room here at Fuseroom was tuned so that it could work for very in-your-face drums and for guitar and bass amps interaction. So when you put these guys in a circle and you let them sometimes bleed one into the other, it really sounds great. And it's those little details that make the record sound, huge. Now, this was done entirely in the box. That's also the secondary thing. I have a very hard time doing mixes entirely in the box. Naturally, I have the hardware, so I need to use it. It would feel like stabbing myself to do that, to not use it. But I have to tell you, to recreate this thing in the box from 2013, where I already had not all the hardware that's here, but quite enough, it's really challenging. Things don't blend and mesh the way I am expecting to do. So I don't want to get into the plugins sound worse than the analog domain or stuff, but I'm giving you my perspective. It does sound more challenging to get right. I find digital to get really, really challenging to achieve a great sound, while with analog things just blend better. Some things I don't miss much, like parallel compression with 1176, although I have to tell you, I ran a masterclass for just on this topic like a couple weeks ago, and the guys that were here, we just set up the 1176. It was EDM, so bass and drums. I mean, those are two very, important topics. And it set there, and it just gave the tune, the right harmonics, the right lows. You can do that with plugs, but it's never gonna be what you're used to. So if you're not used to hardware, you don't know where you would like to go. But if you're used to hardware, to go back, it's really, really hard. So that's to tell you that I'm really passionate about people who just use plugs and can achieve sounds that they can listen to an year after and say, oh, this bass rocks. Because for me, only a few of the works I've done entirely in the box can, achieve that level of, oh, I want to listen to it, it's perfectly fine. With hardware, I find much more forgiving tones and stuff. And this also works for bass. That's one of the main topics that always comes up. So great talent, great song, great room, great amp, great mics. Again, Lot and Eden, Tube, AA and 8. If you want these samples to be heard, just hit me up. I'm just gonna go listen to, actually read the questions that you've sent me. I'm gonna bring up my almighty amp room to see if things move. Let's wanna let you see that. There we go. So this guy is almost, oh, it didn't fall, so that's okay. Because when you put microphones sideways, they tend to go sideways. So I'm gonna, if you have any question, just type it there. And all right, I don't see any. So hello, lots of highs. Hello guys. Hello Size Matters. Hello Avalon Music. Hello there. So if you have any question, type it there or hit me up by email. You know where to reach me. These masterclass will be probably available 1 month from now, so you'll be able to watch it immediately, like maybe in the next few days, but it will not be public as with the other ones. And that's it. Hope you had a great time, and see you for the next one. I'll be here just tuning stuff in, and if you want to have a question and answer, just write. There you go. Marcus, what do you do? Oh, first off, hello Marcus, I didn't know you were here. Would you do the same with VST instruments? Great question. I was just talking about same thing with different topic, but same thing. Like, how does it apply with VST? Okay, with VST instruments, I'll split this answer in two types. Like virtual instruments, in terms of you have real bass, but you have a virtual bass amp, or the second version is you do bass virtually entirely. So if you do bass virtually entirely, like everything is virtual, you really have to pay attention to the fact that some sound libraries have already been super fixed. So what I find myself doing when I people bring virtual instruments is they sometimes have too much of a good scoop. So a snare or a bass are already carved so much that I find myself going in the opposite way. This is something I would address if there's virtual instruments. My ear immediately sort of picks up that there are libraries that sound amazing, but the thing is they sound so amazing that you're putting a sound that was made with an abstract concept of how it should mix itself, and you're putting it in a mix, and it's not really doing what it's required to do. So maybe it's too dipped or too emphasized in some frequencies. And sometimes with VSTs, I do this, but the carves might look exactly, the opposite. Like I bump 600 and I carve 300, or I carve subs because the preset has lots of subs. So that for virtual instruments. But the parallel stuff, yes, I would still do. Consider this though. If you have MIDI and if you have a virtual instrument, you can compress in the MIDI. This is a mindset. Don't have your bass. Oh, Johnny's going. So I have to say, ciao, you're going?
Yeah.
All right.
Tomorrow.
Johnny's going home. Ciao, Johnny. See you tomorrow. And what happens is you can compress in the MIDI because you can get your bass player, virtual guy, to just compress himself. Meaning you go same velocities. It might sound horrible when you see everything at 127 or 96, but it could sound great instead of using all of this compression stuff. These truly, the tape, the 1176, they work great on real stuff because real stuff is a little bit all over the place. A virtual instrument, if it's one of those nice pre-done sounds, don't touch it too much. So maybe just trigger the MIDI and that would work. The virtual bass amps or virtual amps, I had a really, really hard time always, all the time, to blend it in. In fact, most people that have been mixing with me know that I am one of the SoundSamp guys. I'm not old, I don't have a beard, but I inherited the fact that I like SoundSamp to do virtual bass amp. Because real amp emulations with the DI, there's something that it's clinching inside. I'm sure it's just me. Like if you carve it and you make it work, it sounds great. But it just doesn't blend the way that this amp, I don't know if you had the same experience. Maybe you can share it with me. Like if you were surprised by how much these matched. I'm telling you, we had no rehearsal. I just put a mic there. And that's the magic of real air and real mics and converters and all this stuff. Mostly room and amp and mic. With plugins, the virtual amps usually the good ones sound dirty, like they have the trouble that you would have with the real amp. So I wouldn't use plugins. Maybe I would tweak the sound. I wouldn't use the plugin itself to make the sound work. Because then when you compress it or you EQ it, I would think like, okay, I have the amp in front of me. So let's go and let's try and tweak it. So EQ the bass with the DI, it could work. And you, Mark, said the question is, should I go over an amp and track it with microphones? That's entirely on you. Some people do. I get a lot of reamp requests because of the amps I have, and it depends. It depends a lot. Rock stuff done with just DI, I honestly regret some of the stuff we've done with just DI because it works when you have a commercial product. Like if you have Green Day, maybe you can get away with DI and stuff because you have such a produced sound. Even if it sounds stadium rock, it's so produced and the bass has always to be there. But if you have real stuff that plays right, I would go with an amp. I don't play guitar or amp, but I like how it feels and how it is in the room. It is a big investment though, because you don't buy any amp if it's not a good amp. And I'm telling you, the only thing I would buy is an Ampeg like this or a B12. What I love about the B100 is that it's solid state, but it's the exact same cabinet. Don't invent your own cabinet. The cabinets sound horrible if there's not research and development in that. Speaker cabinet sound pressure interaction is paramount. I wanted to build my own. I stopped when I realized how complex it is. This guy being solid state, I can get to saturate much earlier than the 12 and 15 tube amps. They sound amazing. they're amazing, but I'm telling you, you will have a hard time finding out whether this was solid state or tube. I had comparisons on both, and the tube needs to be louder to get that crank, and it creates trouble in the recording rooms, especially if you have a lot of bleeding. Now here we have two separate rooms, extremely well isolated. You were here, so you've seen how the rooms work, but it may make the sound of the snare rattle too much. It may get into other mics. This is, to me, the holy grail of this. They're not terribly expensive, but you need to hunt them down a little bit. I'll go to Florian. Hello, Florian. So, what about sub bass? Most mixes have steep roll-off under 30 with little to nothing under 20. Why? There are many headphones which go down to 8 Hertz. The reason is, it can be various reasons. You know, you have to carve bass, the extreme subs, for the reason that if you go to a PA system and you don't carve DC out, you don't high pass to DC, you will get in real trouble because the speaker will move so much and you can break stuff. The thing is, even if you don't use a high pass, the converters you use, the machines you use, depending on what analog stuff you have, but even last stage, the converters will not be able to print. As far as I know, 1 Hertz or 2 Hertz. I don't think it reaches there. The EQ we built here is, I had to decide what EQ I wanted, like for the high pass, and we ended up with off 10, 20, with off 20, 30, 40. And I rarely even use 20 sometimes. It depends on the track, and you have to listen to it. In here, in this room, I can clearly hear down to, well, my ears don't go very, I don't think I am one of the best ears, you know, for sub-lows, but I can feel around 30. The speakers I have go around 35, 34, but I have a lot of distance between of them. I am as far as 3 meters 15, 3 meters 20. So there's a lot of air that it's between me and the speakers, and people that have been here know there's great sub, and I don't use sub in here. The problem is, if the track has been by the mixing engineer or me or, you know, whoever mixed it, high passed with a lot of tracks, I tend not to use high pass anymore. I always used to go boop and put the high pass because it felt right to use. Honestly, when you can hear how it goes and you start blending, remember when you high pass, the frequency you are at is usually, if it's a 12 dB per octave, you are 3 dBs attenuating what that frequency is. So if you carve at 20, you're touching much higher than 20, and then you can hear it in the speakers. So I get mixes sometimes that need 40 easily, or 53 even sometimes, because the person mixing it couldn't hear that much lows. But when mixes are good, I rarely high pass. So you found the mastering engineer, when I do master, I'm not a mastering engineer, but I do a lot of mastering, and that makes me a mastering engineer in part. I don't high pass. Depends. But if this EQ, for example, this I know because we designed it with 3-4 people together, I know that if you are off with the high pass, and I know this happens with other EQs, for example, I still have around 11 Hertz, 12 dB per octave high pass. So I'm not ever going to around DC. I don't remember if it's 10 or 11, but I know it's there. Sometimes some audio cards can't even detect that, for the reason that their own high pass is higher. So there is a high pass in the equation oftentimes. It's very rare that you will blow a speaker because of DC. And you asked, you noticed under 30 Hz. I think most of the time it's because people can't hear it, can't hear the sub, and they decide because of tutorials or stuff that they've seen that cutting 30 feels great. And it opens up, I'm sure you know, you can write it now, I'm sure you know, some people do it with linear phase because they know that linear phase is going to be better because it doesn't touch phase, but some people steep down cut at 30 Hertz with a non-linear phase, and they can't hear what they're really cutting. Maybe they're hearing the consequence of that cut because of the non-linear phase, and maybe they like it. So I'm still positive. They saw a video tutorial, the guy is famous and he's carving at 30 saying, oh, there's no way you can hear anything because this is sub-lows. And they followed him, which in part can be, there can be value in that, like saying you can go per genre, saying, well, this is rock music, nobody needs 30, but how, you don't know how much 30 is there, you know how it feels in the bottom of the mix. So I'm totally with you when I think you meant like, why do mixes have steep roll off and with little nothing there? There are many headphones which go down. Exactly. I think it's a habit, or it will be safe. The same happens in the high frequencies. I know people that look at, I have some clients that always, friends more than clients, that always look at frequency analyzers and they say, oh, it's, I can see you use analog because you have such, the carve goes gently down and then at 20K it just carves. I don't use visualizers, but, and I don't make it look like there's analog. Sometimes there's no analog involved, there could be, and it still has that thing. But a lot of people go, if it is a professional mastering, you carve anything past 20K. Well, your converter will carve stuff past 20K. So it depends. To filter before a converter, after, it doesn't mean necessarily that it's better. It has to be listened to. Some EQs I know, they go to like, I don't know, 50K. The air band. Can you really listen to 50K? No, you can't. But maybe the carve is so high and so smooth that it's influencing 3K. So, you know, that could work. Others, maybe they're just marketing hype. I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't go with bass that low. One thing that is good that I haven't mentioned that could work is getting a killer bass sound is also deciding who is in the bass range. Do we want the kick or do we want the bass? In this case, I think it's hard because there's an interaction between the two, but I think in the end I made the bass a little bit more rule the low end. I don't know, or the kick. There's not much sub in the kick. I can let you hear to that, just the drums, those of you who are connected. Yeah, let's hear just the drums. I think I have to do this. You're catching me. So this is all kick, all overheads, and all drums. Let's hear who rules. Speakers have gone in standby, but they will probably open. So I think the bass rules the low end, but you can hear the kick has that puff sound, but it doesn't really go boom like really low. It felt okay. It's, to me, this is more of a song where bass rules a little bit more of the bottom. The important thing is get one guy to be down there at 60, around, you know, 50 even, because if you have both there, to blend both at around 40, 50, it's gonna be hard. To blend them at 60 to 90 hertz is a different thing, but there's not much body height. It's funny how much high frequencies the kick has rather than lows. It happens in a lot of rock mixes. Also, there is a tiny little bit of bass compression, I think, around the tracks. Nothing that will make things stand out, you know, or change drastically. You can clearly hear the bass, the kick doesn't really have that much bass. So I hope that question is answered. If you have any other question, I can take one more, because it's 5:45. This was long. Write it down if you thought about everything, anything, and if you don't have questions, you know what I'll do? I'll probably just open the doors. I hear people coming into the room, no, the studio, so maybe it's time for another coffee. No, I had too many. Another thing people use, Pultex. Oh, Pultex is so great. Yes, it is great, but when I had it, when I bought it, brought it back, those have a funny story because those were rebuilt from parts of broken, non-expensive, used Pultex, and in the end it costed me, I wouldn't say as much as making one, but close to there. So I had it, it was super fun, and I used it. Then really you find out those things do a little bit of what they want. They're not too sharp because of the tube transformer relationship. So it can be good. Not on mixes. I don't usually use them anymore on finished mixes because it's really hard to put them into a shape where bass is consistent. They tend to do a little bit of different things all the time. So left and right will change, and if you have a side channel that does have a little bit of bass, you'll find that things are not as tight. But it could be a great sound, that's for sure. But it could also break the mix, and it depends. If it's a reggae R&B tune, everybody's happy. If it's country song, singer-songwriter, amazing. Soundtracks, great. But for mastering EDM, I don't know. It's really hard. I'd rather have a more solid state EQ for that, matched also. Mid-side processing is a little bit better, but that's another thing. Like, it has tons of bass. Sometimes it feels that good. I remember sometimes bypassing the Pultex, and it felt like I was EQing. It still does. That's the beauty of that EQ. You go bypass, and it sounds like you're doing something to the mix. You go in, and it's like, that's how the mix has to sound. And you look at it, and you're adding 1.5 bass, for example, at 30 hertz or 60 hertz. You bypass it, and that's not right. You put it on, and it's like, okay, this is how the mix really sounds the opposite, because it's such a natural sound. But the problem is not too consistent. So that's another thing I would carve. All right, I see there's no more questions. So thank you very much for joining. As I said, you will get the link for this masterclass to watch it again, should you want to. And if you want to join me for any sort of path of studying or working together, just drop me a line. We do paid masterclasses like this thing on your audio material. And I've started doing this because people requested to work on their stuff that sometimes people have to mix on, and they want to mix sometimes something, or they have a gig, or they have a job to do, but they also want to learn how to do it. So you can bring your own audio material. We can do it online or physically in the studio. You'll get the credit for it. Don't worry about that. There's no contract that says you have to put my name, but you will study with me. We'll study together on your own audio material. So it's great if you have 2 months, for example, of a recording session, mixing session, and you are not familiar with the genre. We can do it together. We'll use it as for studying. It will sound great. It will take a little bit of the pressure off, and it's something that you'll remember for. So the prices are on the website. I don't want to do much advertising, but it's cheap. I mean, it's not cheap. It's very good quality, but it's not expensive. So it's made so that everybody. I mean, it's Berlin, right? So it has to work for everyone. That said, we'll see us in the next episode, which I don't know still what the topic is. I hope you had fun. Thank you very much for joining. I'll send you the link for that. And again, the previous masterclass on mid-side will probably be available in the next month. I'm always releasing to the public later than you can see me doing, because it's cooler, right? Hope you had a great time with me here virtually in the studio. If you want to come by for a coffee, do it. And see you in the next masterclass. Ciao.